Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio. We're super excited to welcome multi-instrumentalist and composer Matt Dorsey on the show today. He's joining us because he's got a new album coming out. It's coming out in April, so watch for it. It's called Let Go. And I love the title and I love the title track. So welcome, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you today?
Hey, oh, I'm doing great. I'm swimming in water behind me, but no one knows that. Even though it's winter, it feels like I'm in a tropical island. But that's a thing. I was thinking about that. We always do different backgrounds because we're always in a different place because we travel full time. But there's something about your album that allows you to have that. It's let go. I think it's a hard concept for us to just let go as human beings of anything. We're very let's grab, and maybe that's why we have fingers. So tell us a little bit about the title track and the, why Let Go.
Let Go is the title track, and it's the result of my studies. I say my studies. I've read some stuff about Buddhism. I'm no expert, but I'm drawn towards Eastern philosophies, and one of the central things about Buddhism is just not attaching to things.
Mm-hmm.
The more you attach to things, the more suffering you will suffer. And it's a very difficult concept for, I think, the Western mind to wrap its head around. But I found there's some truth to it. The more you just sort of let go, let the river take you where it will. The calmer your life is, the less stress you feel. Really, that's just it. You let life happen, and that's contrary to everything we're taught growing up. You're supposed to really, hammer ahead and have a goal.
Hey, by 40, you need to have an IRA plan and all that, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that,
No.
But I've found, life is a river, and I just float. The river will take you to beautiful places if you let it. And it's when you fight the tide that you suffer. And you fight the flow. When you decide, I want to be there, and you really, really struggle to get there. Or you could just let the river take you to someplace else, which is probably more beautiful, probably more wonderful. And you just ultimately is just have faith in the flow of things. And it leads, in my estimation, to a stronger sense of peace and happiness.
Jim Morrison wrote something like that. The river told me. I don't know if you've heard that.
I haven't. Or I never know the titles of
free
stuff.
fall, flow, let it flow. On and on we go. Breathe underwater till the end. Oh, well, yes, the river knows. That's what it's called.
Oh, really?
The river knows. And it's, I think it's, we travel full time. We're such minimalists. And we've learned that is the way to go, because you can handle any kind of crap that comes in the world better when you don't have things to hold on to. The more you're holding on, the harder it is to deal with any kind of struggle that comes in your path. And struggles happen. And it doesn't mean that we don't get to, not let go. You can have a good fight, but you got to fight for what's right. You know what I mean?
That's right. Even if you do let the river take you and you're just sort of floating, you still have to work to stay afloat.
Yeah, but it's I call it being one with the universe. That's why nature to me is the ultimate goddess. She's like everything. And if you don't take time, you're screwed.
Yeah. Have you heard are you a pantheist?
Am I a what?
A pantheist.
I don't know.
A pantheist is one who believes that God and the universe are identical. They're the same thing.
Oh, maybe I am then.
God didn't make the universe. God actually is the universe. And the flow of time and history is God being God. The laws of nature are the will of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I'm that then.
Huh. It's called pantheism. It's a very old idea.
Well, apparently I wasn't that old. I can't come back and reincarnate. But I like that because, I had a conversation once with a Mennonite about this.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, hey, you guys are doing this and you're doing that. But we're in his garden and they were going through some crop disease. I know this sounds weird. We're supposed to be talking about music, not crops, but they had a fungus going on. We were talking about diversification of plants and
Right.
all of that. And then, I don't know, it was a tourism thing, believe it or not, but of course, none of us behaved what we're supposed to say and do. We're supposed to eat pie and shut up and go, look, this is a delicious apple pie. But then we had the apple pie, and then we start talking, and I remember the tourism guy taking us around going, oh my God, these two are talking religion with the Mennonite dude. And his face almost fell to the floor, and I'm going, why not?
Why
And he
not?
was sitting there telling me, I'm like going, well, Mother Nature to me is like everything.
Right.
And he's like, well, God made Mother Nature. And then we looked at each other, we're like, okay, well, let's talk about what we can talk about, because we're not going to agree on that part.
Exactly.
But I think what you just told me is pretty cool. Pantheist.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. So the thing too with your music, okay, I love the whole album, and it does flow really good, and that's something always a big deal. But Compromise, tell me about that song, because that was one that really stood out for me. And then Waiting for the Fall,
Mhm.
it goes to what we were talking about. There was this line that I wrote down: free myself to believe in myself.
Mhm.
That's some strong wording.
Yeah, well, Waiting for the
Because
Fall.
you went from compromise to that. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah, no, I mean, the album is it's pretty diverse. It's all over the place. And
But it flows.
my feeling is that, life is about many, many things, and your art should reflect that, I mean, you listen to some albums, and I'm not dismissing anything here, but you listen to a lot of albums, and every song is angry. Everyone is the same feel and, mood. But that's not what life is. Life is beauty and disappointment and excitement and joy and bitterness and all of it. So, it is a diverse album, but I don't think that's necessarily a problem. Some would say it is, because you're supposed to have some sort of cohesive, theme.
I don't know. I liked it. I mean,
Oh,
listening to it, just going through it, I'm like, oh, each one, because it's true. If you can't overflow, right? You don't want to have the same rush of sound where it's the same waterfall.
Right.
The
Mhm.
waterfall has to dry up a little bit for a different sound.
Mhm.
And that's what you have. And daily life, if your daily life is the same routine over and over with no change, all right, well, I'm done.
Right. Yeah. And that,
Yeah.
that's fine for some people. But for artists in particular, we do like we like new things all the time. So in any case, Waiting for the Fall is about sort of facing the challenges of perpetual failure, really wanting to move forward, really feeling like you're getting somewhere, and then just having the rug pulled every single time, to the point where you start anticipating that fall. You start to feel like, okay, this is working, this is going well, but okay, now what? Where's the the thing that's going to trip me up? And that's sort of what it is. The music industry, although the song isn't necessarily strictly about it, but it's a good example of that. The music industry will disappoint you every time. Every time you get kicked in the gut, it's so disappointing. You try, you really get hopeful, really get excited about the stuff that you're working on, and then things fall apart for every reason under the sun. And like I said, it's not just music, but it is a good example of that. It's frustrating. That's why I wrote a song about it.
Yeah, no, I think you're really right about it, because I mean, that's just life too, right? I mean, industry has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about what careers were there when I graduated high school to what they are now are two different things.
For sure.
And I think about, like our business is we magazine people.
Mhm.
We were back. I mean, I was working in this industry as a teenager, cutting and pasting. So now, yes, now I feel really old, but I'm not that old. You know what I mean? So it's like, how did we go from here? And to watch our industry just go, screw you.
Right.
We're not doing this anymore. And my mom, who's, co-owner of everything with me, she said, that's it, no more printing. And I'm like, what do you mean? I always wanted the printing press. I wanted the whiskey and the cigar. Not that I even know how to smoke cigars, but I'll drink the whiskey and put my feet up on the table and go look at my press. That whole vision, because women were never seen doing that. I wanted to be one of those, and not necessarily with the feet on the desk, but just really like we needed to have women in that force that knew how to do it. And then the industry said, screw you, like across the board, but we got out in time while everybody else kept trying when it was like you're beating your head against the wall. And she's like, we're doing so much better on the website. We've got millions of people. We need to do this.
That's
And
fighting.
here it is.
That's fighting against the flow of the river, right?
Right, exactly. See, and so it's like, it's about perspective.
Yeah, and look at where you are now. I mean, aren't you in a good spot?
Right now, we are in Durham, North Carolina, with 2 little dogs that we're taking care of, and a little creek full of frogs. Now, so spring is here. So to me, I'm like, I haven't heard frogs for so long that it's the best thing on the planet.
Oh, that's awesome. Right on. Cool.
So that's joy. Like, you know what I mean? You get to have things like that. So, and yes, magazine wise, now we have like what? A whole bunch of digital magazines and better readership than ever, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So isn't that
You
kind of
wouldn't
with the
have even
music
thought.
industry too?
That's just stuff you wouldn't have even thought of, 10 years ago. And here you are, the river brought you to all this other cool stuff. So,
And for music, is it the same way in regards to now you're streaming, talk about rivers, right? People, you can have tens, hundreds, thousands of people streaming your music than the physical copies, but don't you want those physical copies there too in the vinyl, in that experience?
well, yeah, and it seems like I don't know, I don't want to say it's dying out, especially with vinyl on the resurgence here, but it seems like that's the direction of things. Ultimately, we're probably all going to be listening to music forevermore, without a product in our hand. It's just all going to be streaming, probably directly into our brains at some point.
If we had a music, I'll accept the music chip.
Yeah, okay.
If we're gonna get a chip
Cool.
implanted in us when we're born, I want the music chip. I'm okay with that.
But for right now, yes, I do want product. I do want something to give to people at shows.
I want the vinyl too.
Yeah.
Being on the road full time, I would do anything for I keep the car that we have, other than the fact is I don't believe in getting rid of, by the way, you just caused a rainstorm. I just want you to know. You kept talking about water and the rain just started.
Really
But no, it's a good thing. When you're driving, I have a CD player in my car, so I don't want to get rid of the car, even though it's got hundreds of thousands of miles, because it has a CD player and it jams once in a while. But I'm like, come on, baby, you can do it. But it's just because it's got a CD player. So like, that's how sick I am. But can you imagine like having vinyl in your car?
Oh, that'd be cool.
I want that. Yeah. Are you going to do vinyl? Are you going to do a CD? What's
We are
happening
talking
with the
about it.
album?
If we do well enough with the CD and the downloads, then yeah, we'll talk about it. It takes like half a year to get that kind of thing produced. And at this stage of the game, it's just too early to make an investment like that before we know how well we're doing. I'm already doing pretty well with pre-sales, and I'm expanding my fan base, better than I was expecting. So it's likely, but it's still too early to tell.
Well, I want people to know, like, your background in music is epic. It's, you're a badass in everything you do, but it's your bass, you're writing songs, your guitar, everything. So this is your debut album, right? Which, I'm listening to this going, what do you mean it's his debut album? Like, it's great, but you've got, Dave Kerzner, you played with him, right? And his bands. He was on our show right before the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Right before that happened, and he's fantastic. And then
He's the best.
Andrew Collier was on our show, and you play with him too, right?
Yeah, I did some work with Circuline on their first album. I played bass, and I actually mixed that album, and then I played some guitar on the second album, and we're talking about co-writing some of the songs on the third.
Oh, very cool. And then Beth Hart. Can't say
That
that.
was my first professional gig, and that's the whole reason I moved from Boston to Los Angeles. I remember I called a friend of mine who was in New York City, when I was back in Boston selling cars, and I said, man, you know anybody who needs a bass player? He goes, you know what, I think I do. And yeah, you know, we hang up, and I get a call a week later from Beth Hart asking if I could come out for an audition. I was like, of course, of course. First, she asked me to send her a tape of my stuff. I sent her a tape, and she's like, sounds great, come on out. So I flew out to LA, and you know, I never went back. I got the gig,
Dude.
which only lasted for about 6 months. You know, ran into some issues, and the tour ended. But I was like, I'm not going home. I'm not going back to Boston. I'm not going back to the cold. I mean, I love Boston. I love, you know, New England, and I miss my friends and certainly my brothers who are both still up there with their families. But yeah, as soon as I got off the plane in California, I felt at home. It's just, you know.
Did you tour with her?
Yeah, for about half a
So
year.
was that getting your feet wet for touring with
It
her?
was, yeah, it sure was. That was my first tour. It was on a 33-foot RV, not, you know,
Oh my God.
not a real tour bus, but my God, the memories we made, are just priceless, really.
Yeah.
And
And
it's funny,
she's crazy. She's
when I,
crazy good. Like she's crazy. Like, you know what I mean? Like
yeah, she's
watching
crazy
her
on many
performance.
levels. And, you know, I'm not saying anything like against her.
No,
She'll tell you
no,
the
no,
same on the stage. She'll tell you how crazy she is. You know, she has
no, no.
drugs
It's
and alcohol, and, you know, that's just
okay.
a quick story. When I got off the plane, she was there to pick me up at the airport. And she was in one of those, like, back then it was a newly remodeled Volkswagen Beetle.
Oh yeah.
And it had like flower stickers all over it. And I get in the car, and there's dead flowers all over the dashboard. Beth is sitting there in the driver's seat, and it's a stick shift, and she's got a dog on her lap. She's got a bird on her shoulder. She's got a cup of coffee, a cigarette, and a cell phone. And she's driving faster than anyone I've ever.
And a stick. And most people don't even know how to drive a stick anymore, man.
I was like, what did I get myself into?
Dude,
Yeah.
that's kind of a Janis Joplin thing too, right? Back in
Oh,
the day
yeah.
when she had I used to play with a drummer, Willie Kellogg, he was out in LA and San Diego, drummer. He's passed since. And he was drummer for Flying Burrito Brothers and Canned Heat and Moby Grape and all those guys. And so we used to live up in the mountains in San Diego and Julian. And he'd come up in his little VW. He had this from the 70s, I swear to God. He'd drive up, and one day he went down the ditch, and his radio, because his radio went flying down, because he had his tape deck of, you're talking about Eastern music, he'd bring me Sufi music and all this stuff,
Okay.
and we'd listen, and he'd play the djembe, and we'd just riff on all these harmonies and all kinds of, I don't know. Anyway, we had a good time. That's all I can say. And he went out of the cabin, and that went down. So I don't know what he did, but maybe he had a little bit too much weed that night. But suddenly the VW was down there too. Anyway, we got him out. But he would sit there and you'd talk about my mom. He'd go, Nancy doesn't need anything. She's the butterfly woman. She can see all the colors in the sky. And I'm like, dude, you know, but he's
Wow.
passed since. But
That sounds more like LSD than weed.
well, he was a little dude from Texas, you know, half Mexican, and he stabbed the guitarist, Joel Scott Hills. Also, he like did his, you know, everybody kind of changes out in those bands, and
Sure.
and Joel he was really, the drug stories are crazy with him. And I put on this concert up in the mountain town to raise money for a musician, kids learning music.
Oh, cool.
And then they came up in the same car, and then Joel was high, and then so Willie stabbed him. He had this little walking stick, because he's a little dude. He looked like a little munchkin. Like, I mean, I'm in a happy way. Like, you know, like he looked more Irish than he did who he was. And he says, I stabbed the devil. I stabbed him. And he had a little walking stick. He opened up halfway, and there was a little knife. And Joel apparently was an idiot in the truck on the way up. And so he stabbed Joel. And then we did a show, and it was badass. It was fun times.
You know, when you first said that he stabbed him, I was like, is that really what she just said? He stabbed him.
He stabbed the devil is what he said. And now they're both dead, but that sucks. So I can tell the story. But
Wow.
yeah, the VWs, when I see VWs, man, I mean, that they were all over South Africa and Kenya when I grew up. Those were like, when I see, and then they made those other, you said you sold cars. What were
Yeah,
you
I sold
selling?
Saturns. I was selling Saturns for a few years. like I think 98, 99, 2000, way back when. Saturn's was a cool company, but you didn't make too much money because they didn't haggle on the price, and so we weren't dicking our customers to put money in our own pockets like a lot of these car salesmen do. These,
I sold cars for a month when
yeah.
we got back to this country from South Africa and started up the magazine. Pre that, we were both saying we're not doing the magazine industry again. It's so hard.
Mhm.
That didn't last long. Then we moved to Mexico and then came back over to California. And I went and sold cars for Toyota. I was so bored.
Yeah.
People could come up and go, is this a V6 or V8? And I'm like, well, why don't you open the hood and see for yourself? Because right now I'm playing air guitar. I'm so bored. I can give a damn. So, you know what I mean? But those are those jobs.
It's not for
But
you.
no, it wasn't. And I know sales and everything, but
Mhm.
it was just so boring if you can't be proactive.
Yeah, and you have to. You really do. Like I remember.
And that wasn't proactive. It was, you had to stand on the lot all day. So what would, I mean, did you play air guitar too? Like when you were waiting for people to get on the lot?
Yeah, I don't think I ever did bring my guitar to work. It wouldn't have been a bad idea, but probably frowned upon professionally.
And then you have to give someone a test drive. It's like, let me serenade you.
Yeah, right.
But that's interesting. You did car sales. So but did that teach you about audience connection in any way?
What it taught me was that if you're doing something that you're not passionate about,
Get the hell out.
shift gears. And
Yeah.
that led to my call to my friend that changed my life. I called him twice. Once was for the Beth Hart gig. I didn't ask for Beth. I just said, do you know anybody? And he just happened to know she was looking for somebody at the time. Interesting enough, before we move on from Beth, she hired me without telling her manager, and there was no budget for me for the first couple of weeks. So I was basically playing for like $50 a week.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That doesn't get you anything.
No, but I wouldn't trade it, right?
Right. I know
I was paid in memories, in great memories. But the second time I called my friend, his name is Tommy DeBenedictis. He's a radio promoter in New York City. I think he's at Sony Red right now. He's doing great. I called him when I heard that Phil Collins' son was putting together a band to promote his third album. And so he managed to call, the right people and get me an audition. So I flew up to Vancouver and got that gig. And that led to Sound of Contact, which Simon, Dave Kerzner, Kelly Nelson and I formed after that campaign. And
But you made the call. See, that's kind of where I feel it's really important. Like you go with life, but if it's, that whole thing about knocking your head against the wall, you could be doing that, or you could be making the calls that you want that open the door. And when the doors open, it's so much easier in life.
For sure.
But you can't just get in the river and not participate.
No, you have to. Absolutely have to participate. These two examples are, they taught me so much that you have to ask the question. If you never ask the question, you won't get the answer. You'll always wonder. You have to ask.
That's why I go back to that lyric, free myself to believe in myself. It's kind of like we grip on things so much that we forget who we are, that you have to let go to see yourself. It's like almost like seeing yourself from outside. You have to get outside your body.
Man, that's so important, and I'm not advocating for drug use, but one thing that I have noticed from, smoking weed, and, I did dabble with LSD back as a teenager in early 20s, is that's what it provided, other than, just the usual recreational fun, is it allowed you to see not just yourself, but reality from a different perspective. And whether or not that perspective was accurate, the fact that it was a different perspective shatters your belief in your own perspective. It allows you to rethink everything, right?
Agree.
Up until that point, you just accept, I like to say that you don't know what your house looks like until you leave it and turn around and take a look. And I think our psyche is the same. You need to get out of it however you can, whether it's through, yoga, meditation, smoking a little weed. I'm not advocating anyone do any of that kind of stuff if they're not into it. But yeah.
Well, it's traveling. I mean,
to realize that
get
the
out of your
perspective
comfort
you've been
zone.
walking around with is you know it's worthy of questioning.
You got to get out of your rhythm
Mhm.
to find a new rhythm. Otherwise, you're stuck in the same rhythm, right? And if you look at music,
Mhm.
I mean, if we didn't have all these rhythm makers like Bo Diddley and stuff, like where the hell would we be? You know, and
Mhm.
as bass player, I think it's key that you bass, because I think bass brings it all down to the simplistics, and it is the unity of, obviously, I always say the drums and the bass are the foundation, and they are of the band, right? And you can, sometimes when people say, oh, okay, we're not going to have a drummer, we're just going to have a bass player. I'm like, you could do that. Take away the bass player and only have a drummer, you're screwed unless you have a really good keyboardist or really, you know what I mean? You've got to have someone with solid keys, not twinkly toes up there, but like, you know what I mean? You got to have some bass. But bass, I always wonder about writing on bass, because writing music, when you have that bass, I say bass mentality, and that sounds so wrong, but I don't mean it that way.
No,
it keeps it down, simplistic, real, something tangible that you can go off of. And music that's really good, and I wanted to ask you about that too, being prog rock, is that it's supposed to take you on a journey and transport, just like if you're, smoking a joint and whatever. It meditation, all of that. I don't know if prog rock to me has still got a little bit of psychedelic stuff going on in there, right?
I don't mind when there is. Yeah, I like that. I like that element. I do.
But you got to have the bass.
Well, bass is it's primary. It's really the backbone of the song, I think. And everything's sort of built around the bass line. It's easily overlooked, but you can certainly feel it when it's not there. It was the first instrument I learned how to play. My dad was a piano player. My brother was a drummer for a while, a couple of years, and my younger brother got a guitar for Christmas one year. I was 14 and I turned 15 in January. I said, Dad, all we need is a bass and we've got a whole band. So January 15, he brought me to Daddy's Junkie Music Store and he bought me my first bass and amplifier, and immediately started practicing playing all of my favorite albums, all of which were the Police. I was listening to all the Police albums. And so I sat there and I just listened and learned all the Police records, which is
that's bass driven though too.
It is, and it's funny because from what I understand, obviously I'm a big Sting fan, being a Police fan. He wrote a lot of his stuff just playing bass and singing his melodies over that. I don't do that much, to be honest with you. I find it much easier to write a song on guitar or keyboard. But it's funny because I was really influenced by Sting, and that's how he wrote a lot of his stuff.
I think that it's in you whether or not you're writing it, what on a guitar or bass or a piano. Once you have that, that's what I meant about the bass mentality, bass soul, I should say, like the soul of the bass, because it's like you're putting down the root and then allowing the plant to grow up and out.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a solid foundation against which everything else can be measured, right? You can have a note just floating in the air and you don't know if it's major or minor unless it's in relation to your root note, right? So
I like that. Yeah, it's like a little bee. It's got to go to its flower.
That's right.
I know. Sorry, I'm tripping out now, and I'm not doing anything, man. I'm just sitting here talking to you, and I'm like, all right, I don't know. I'm just seeing bees and flowers. It's all good with me, and I'm supposed to be in the ocean, but it's all good. but and that's the thing about music is transportation, and a good album. And listening to this, you've got some other cultural vibes in there to me. Listening to it, like I was talking about Willie, like the drummer, he would just sit there with the jam band. He'd like, slow it down, Lisa, go back here and like use your African roots, because they grew up in Africa. And I'm like, go back to those soul things. And he actually could identify tribal music that I grew up with, and I didn't know what the hell it was. I just grew up with it, you know what I mean? And he'd go like, no, this is this rhythm and that. But it was this, and I listening to that, and Dave Kerzner has that in his music. He has a song, Hello, My Old Friend, I play
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot.
Mhm.
That has something in there that just kind of tweaks me back to, not tweaks and drugs, Jesus,
Yeah, I
but
know what you mean.
kind of, you know what I mean? Kind of, I don't know, just that it has that vibe of like my growing up, and
Mhm.
everybody has a different thing on their music. So I don't want to put my stuff on your album, but that's the beauty of what you know, you just start to resonate. And I think really good albums, and yours gives you this tactile feel, and there's an earthiness to it. And
Okay.
prog rock, a lot of times, I hate to say, loses earthiness.
Yeah, prog can go too far in certain directions, in my opinion. Everyone has their own tastes.
Right.
But I don't consider this album prog proper. It's got some prog influences, but it's more rock pop prog. You know what I mean? It's I think a bit more mainstream than a lot of the prog that you hear out there. But I think it's a blend. I like to call it progressive pop rock.
You said blend.
I did.
Since we're a big blend radio, we're happy with that.
That's
Everything's
fine.
connected, right? It's all connected.
It is all
So
connected.
it is. So when did you start writing this? I mean, was there a certain song? What was the whole catalyst of it's time to do this? You know, because you're playing in so many different bands and projects.
I know. Well, this has been sort of the goal for the last 30 years, honestly. And
Awesome.
combination of insecurities and fears and doubts and life getting in the way and just getting distracted, being lazy.
What?
There's so
I
many
don't know.
factors that go into why it's taken so long. I don't know. I always wanted to release an album, but I never really felt like, okay, you got to do it now. Like you have to do it or it's going to be too late. I just knew it would happen when it happened. I didn't expect it to take this long, but certain things happened over the last year that made it just the ripe moment, and it just sort of it happened.
Oh, I think that's how things are supposed to be.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're like, oh, you got to push yourself to do this.
Mhm.
And no matter what, again, then you're beating your head against the wall, right? Instead of the river.
Mhm.
Going back to the river, man.
Yep.
Now I'm going to have, yeah, I like the river. I want to go back in there. Can we talk a little bit about Dangerous? Because
Mhm.
that's an interesting song to go, okay, now you've done all this. Now, boom. So it's like you kind of put us at this point at the end of the album going, oh shit, I've got to jump off the deep end now. There's a waterfall. Let's go. Do we do it or do we try to go upstream? Where do we go? Like,
Well, Dangerous is the last song that I ever wrote. I mean, I'm working on other stuff right now, but nothing's finished. That one is the last one that I completed like mid last year. And it just came together in a couple of sessions. And I had this sort of riff going on and I had this melody and I hit record through a microphone and these words just sort of came out, and that's how I write. I usually just sing nonsense syllables just so I get the melody on tape and then listen back, and those nonsense syllables sort of sometimes, suggest a word or a phrase, and then it goes from there. I build it from there. I'm not much of a poet, and I don't just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a song about love, or I'm going to write a song about this or that. It all just sort of evolves as I write, and lyrics are always the last thing that I do. But I find it a very lighthearted song. It's not a very serious song. It's just kind of a goofy love song.
but you are going to jump off the waterfall.
Yeah. Yeah. It's two people who are like right on the edge, their boundaries have met, and they're looking down the boundary line, and they're wondering, are we going to jump in together? Is this for real? And the excitement of that moment is really what the song is all about. I felt like it was a good last song because it is lighthearted,
Perfect.
melodic, and I think that the song, the album is pretty, it's dense, and and I felt like it was a good way to. It's like dessert at the end of the meal.
Yeah, but it does give you that excitement of what's next, and that's what you want. Sometimes albums just like, here's the finale and now it's ended, and you're like, all right, now what? Whereas this is now what, but like now what? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Okay, well, I'm glad that that's your reaction.
Yeah, to me, is like, okay, do we go for it? Like where, so you have that little bit of that moment, like you're talking about. That's why I said to you, it's like, you're either going to swim upstream or you're going to do the jump. And that's the thing, that little moment, I think it's cool. I like dangerous because you've got to embrace the fear of life.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
it's about
going on stage, do you ever get scared?
I haven't yet gone on stage without feeling, pretty significant anxiety. It's gotten better over the years, but yeah, I'm very, very shy. I'm very self-conscious. I don't like the spotlight. I don't like being in a situation where I'm the center of attention. I really have never liked that. I've always, been a wallflower, shunned any sort of attention grabbing. But in the end, I have to honor this art that I have and that I want to share.
I
and
think in
it's
every
not all
craft, we have to
horrible,
hug the fear at some place.
Mhm.
In any craft that we all do.
Yeah.
Whether it's somebody, working day labor or something, then having to go up and say, hey, I need to progress to this level and I need to raise, or whatever it is. There's fear, and no matter whose life, whatever our path is, there's that fear. And that's why I think performance is so interesting, because in the arts, it's still solitary. Even though in musicians, like we're all connected in that moment, getting up on stage, like I could sing. Don't ask me to talk to the audience. Can't talk to the audience.
Is that right?
Down. Yeah, but look what I do. Like until I started talking absolute horseshit
Right.
to the audience, like telling people, like acting like we were in a supermarket to go run down this aisle. We're playing like grocery games and shit. Like then I could do it. And but if I had to like just go like, and now we're gonna play this, I can't do that. So I felt so weird and not me that I couldn't do it until I got
Artificial.
stupid.
Right.
Yeah, artificial. And then we played on some military base, and we had this
Were you
camo
the lead
covering.
singer?
Yeah, and we had this camo thing. Oh, oopsie! What did I just hit in this? I'm recording in a closet. Sorry, literally in a closet. Anyway,
we're recording in a wave.
no, a wave in a closet. That's why I need the water. But anyway, so I go up and they have this camo thing that we're playing on in Camp Pendleton, Oceanside. And then all of a sudden I'm like, come on guys, we're gonna duck for cover. And we start rolling on the like we're fighting, like just roll on the stage like as though we're shooting and stuff. And that's the only way, that's what taught me to stand up and speak. And then the band broke up. So anyway.
Wow. Interesting.
But anyway, but it's weird how you have those things. So like for you going on stage, but what's it like going in to record and then record your own music and communicate with what you want in regards to like, okay, because that to me is also a very difficult thing.
Under certain circumstances, I'd imagine it would be, but I've got a home studio that I've built here, and I've got it pretty well sound insulated, so I can come in here and make the worst sounds and know that no one will ever hear me, right? And I do make lots of really awful sounds in the process of making good ones. And I don't want anyone to hear that. I am very self-conscious. Like, for example, my parents got me a violin many, many years ago, and I never learned to play it because I didn't want to, when you start playing violin, it's going to sound awful. Right?
Dude, that's harsh.
It's just one of the worst sounds as somebody learning violin. And I just didn't want anybody to have to suffer through that, and I didn't want the embarrassment of people hearing that. And so I just sort of never got around to doing it. Just as an example of how that kind of thing affects me. Here, I feel utterly at peace, and there's nothing holding me back here. No one can hear me.
Nice.
I just hit record and let whatever comes out come out, and it's I don't know, 60% shit. And then I take the other 40% and I, shave it.
Yeah.
Sculpt it.
That's like, it's so nice to not have to type on typewriters anymore. I don't know what you guys, we used to call it Tipex and Southern Whiteout or whatever. We don't have
Right.
to do that. And then everybody sees all these white splotches on all the pieces of paper that eventually become one sea of white.
Right.
You know,
Word
it's,
processing.
yeah, yeah. So, but it made you really think to slow down, right? So isn't that changed in recording music too? That it's like digital photography,
Right.
computer, all of this stuff
Right.
has changed.
No, to that point, I have, I haven't really exercised the muscles I would need to be like a studio guy. Like you wouldn't call me and say, hey man, come record this album with us. Here are the charts. You know what I mean? Those guys need to be ready just like that and nail it on the first or second try. I,
Oh,
I need a lot more time than that. you know,
yeah.
I need to screw around and find stuff and that kind of thing. So, I mean, you do what works for you.
My hat goes off to studio musicians who can just sit down and read the music and do it. I have to feel it. I have to I can't read music that I can, but unless you practice that,
Right.
yeah, to me, there's going to be a jam quality. So with this album, you've got all these different people too playing with you, right?
No,
So
I've got,
just, what was it, just Dave mostly?
Dave is playing keyboards on one song.
Okay.
And then I've got Marco Miniman playing drums on 3 and Jonathan Mover playing drums on another 3. And I'm playing everything else.
Holy cow. Like, so when we called you a multi-instrumentalist, like it's seriously true.
Yeah, this album is, I've always wanted to at least release
That's
one song
cool.
where I play every instrument, just pull a Lenny Kravitz, however you say it.
Yeah.
It's always just been a dream of mine. And I managed to get 2 of the songs on this album where I'm doing it all. And,
Which ones are those? The ones that are just yours? Like 100%.
Dangerous and
Oh,
Compromise.
ah, 2 that I picked out too, huh? Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, then Compromise, to me, I love that. I thought that was like listening to the album and the beginning, because it's like the second track, right? And I'm going, okay, we're gonna go flow. And then, oh, wait, Compromise, now what you're gonna do? Dangerous takes us right back through that loop. I think it's a brilliant. That's great.
Well, I'm
You
glad
know,
that you like the way that it flows. I haven't actually talked to anybody about, the arrangement of the songs on the album. I haven't gotten really any feedback about that. So I'm glad that you.
I'm weird about that, because to me, I think we're in such a single driven world that
Mhm.
people just listen to whatever, or like, I'll go in a grocery store and pick out a bottle of wine because of the label. And
Mhm.
I don't care what, like, cost wise, like if it's got a dog or a horse, I'm buying it. Even if it's like $2 chuck, I don't care if it's like cheaper wine, but if it's got a dog or a horse, it's on board.
Yep.
But I'm kind of that way musically. It's like the single thing, it's I get it, but I want the experience. So that's how I listen. If I'm going in to listen to an album, which I do before everyone comes on, and most of the time listen quite a few times, if it's not gelling that way,
Mhm.
no. I mean, I listen before, I'm like, okay, I'll listen through a few things and say, oh yeah, this is a good, guest, or, for a show. But if it doesn't feel right and I can't listen through the whole thing, like if someone tries to interrupt me while I'm listening to it,
Mhm.
and I don't go like, shut up, leave me alone. Sorry. And I do say that a bit, but I don't mean to be mean or rude. But like, if I don't get upset because I'm being interrupted, then that wasn't good enough for me,
No, listening
you
to a
know?
whole album in one go, it's a different experience. And
It's the way it should be, you know,
well, should
to me.
is it's a funny word. I think
Yeah.
it's good in a lot of ways to do it that way. That's how we grew up, right? Listening to whole albums, looking at the liner notes and then big
God, I
fade
miss
out,
that.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
But as we've talked about many times already, life has changed. Our generation, it, or the new generation doesn't really listen to music in the same way. The
Mm.
attention span is it isn't what it used to be for assorted reasons. And I don't know if that's either good or bad, good and bad or contextual anyway. It depends on the framework you're working from. But the reality is it's just what it is.
Hmm. And it's everyone's perspective of what they are at that time. because you will identify with songs on an album that mean something to you for something, right?
Yeah.
And like Dangerous for You and you know, different things. And to me, that you will play that song when you want it, just to hear that song for that reason,
Right.
that memory. So you're not going to listen to the whole album for that, but the whole album is, it's like reading a book. I was talking about that with another musician the other day. I mean, the whole single industry is like saying, here's a chapter, but don't read the whole book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to answer your question more directly, I would love it if people would experience the album as a whole, you know?
Mm.
If I could sort of write the script myself, yeah, I would have people sit down and it's not a very long album. I think it's just over 30 minutes. And just, you know, listen to the whole thing.
That's so funny that you even bring up the amount of time. Because we do our show that on our Spotify show, it's a new one, the Big Daily Blend. It's like we play music of who was what happening in history.
Mhm.
When you go back to the older songs, the hits, if it even got near to the 3 minutes, like,
Right.
no.
Right.
You know, how we allowed music to, not allowed, but how the record labels eventually and radio stations had to allow musicians to start increasing the sound. I remember when we first started our podcast, I mean, years ago, musicians go, oh, I know, don't play this for the radio because it's like 6-7 minutes. I'm like, I already just want to play that now, just for that entire reason.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I don't care if it's good or bad or what anybody thinks, but just because it's 6 or 7 minutes, let's play it. You know what I mean? So that, just what you just said, though, it's like, oh, it's only 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That's interesting about its time investment.
It is, yeah. But you know, that said, I'm perfectly happy with anybody who just wants to listen to one of my songs. Seriously.
Well, it's a good album. And
Thank
I'm
you.
glad. Congratulations. So everyone, is it April 6th? What date is it?
April 7th.
Oh, April 7th, excuse me.
Sure.
Not April Fool's Day. But you can pre-order it now through thebandwagonusa.com. Just go /collections/Matt-Dorsey, or just go to mattdorseyofficial.com. That's the best place to go. Also go to Bandcamp as well. I know that you're on there, so you can go to Matt Dorsey and the number 1 on Bandcamp. Bandcamp is cool for musicians. They really are. So
Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Yeah, it was really nice to meet you.
You too. You too. So have fun splashing out in that river.
You as well.
I know I've got a tidal wave coming on behind me, so like hopefully I'll be all right.
I'm sure you will.
There's no sharks.
Roses around.